Well, hey everyone, good to see y'all. I hope you had a great Easter. He is risen. There you go. He is risen indeed. I hope you said it with me. Before we get started, I just have a few quick testimonies. In the same way God raised Jesus from death to life, there has been an abundance of salvations happening here in our church. In fact, over the past month alone, we have seen dozens upon dozens of people making a first-time decision to follow Christ. And, I'm not for sure exactly what all is happening, but there is one thing that I do know, and that God is moving. And so just excited about that, and hope you guys can celebrate with me. But today, the focus we're going to be focusing on is Jeremiah 23. And in this, there is a hugely strong correlation between what is happening here in this chapter and also what has happened right after Jesus resurrected in the New Testament. And so let's read Jeremiah 23 right out of the gate with verse 1. And this is what it says. It says, "Woe to the shepherds. Woe to the shepherds." You see, he's not talking about real shepherds, but rather he's talking about spiritual leaders who oversaw the people of God. And in that day, it could have been a variety of people. It could have been political leaders, business leaders, military leaders, but either way, they were responsible for God's flock, so to speak. And so he says, "Woe to the shepherds." But then he goes on and says, "who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture." You see, in Jeremiah, many of God's people were being scattered due to ungodliness. And it reminds me of what happened after Jesus resurrected and ascended. If you guys remember in Acts chapter 8, verse 1, it says, "On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered." There's our word again. "Through Judea and Samaria." You see, in the same way, people scattered in Jeremiah's time, the early church also scattered after Jesus died and resurrected. And if you keep on reading in Jeremiah, here's what it says. "Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says to the shepherds who tend my people. Because you have scattered my flock and have driven them away and have not bestowed care on them, I will bestow punishment on you for the evil you have done, declares the Lord." You see, we at Church of the Front Range, ever since we started launching a new church, God has been speaking so much of what it looks like to shepherd a community. In fact, as many of you know, in a couple of weeks here, we're going to be launching adult small groups on April 14th. And when we pray, you know what he continuously brings up? He continuously brings up what it looks like to shepherd a community, with him being the ultimate shepherd, and what it looks like to be under shepherds pastoring his flock. And here's the cool thing. Even though there is a scattering going on, both in the Old Testament with what we're reading now, in Jeremiah, but also in the New Testament in the book of Acts, look at what God says in verse 3 in Jeremiah. He says, "I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I've driven them, and will bring them back to their pasture." You see, this is totally about the new covenant, and that God is referring to, and what he is going to do through the Messiah, who is Jesus. Okay, and he goes and he continues. He says, "Where they will be fruitful and increase in number." I mean, think about that. Think about what happened in the early church. Though they scattered, what did God do? He did exactly this. The church has grown ever since. It's been increasing, and his kingdom has continuously been expanding. And how does he do this? If you keep reading, this is what it says. He says, "I will place shepherds over them who tend them, and they will no longer be afraid or terrified, nor will any be missing, declares the Lord." Did you catch that? Right? Though there was persecution, and though they scattered, how did God gather the remnant and bring about an increase in number? I mean, how did God promise that there would be no fear, and to ensure not a single one would go missing? It's that word right there where he says, "I will place shepherds over them who tend them." You see, the role of a shepherd it's hugely important, not only because he is the great shepherd, but because he is also calling us to be shepherds. In 1 Peter 5:2, he says, "Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care." And so the question for today is this: are you playing the role of an under shepherd to anyone in God's flock? I know that many people think a shepherd is, gentle and caring and merciful, but that's truly not an accurate picture of what a shepherd is. In fact, a shepherd is actually a warrior who loves who protects, who rescues, and who leads God's people. And so as we close, there's really just two encouragements that I have for you. First of all, I want you to think about a shepherd's staff. Okay, they have two tools, a staff and a rod. So think about a shepherd's staff. What does it do? A shepherd's staff, it leads and it directs. But spiritually speaking, how does a true shepherd lead and direct? You see, in Jeremiah 3:15, he says, "Then I will give you shepherds after my own heart." And what does this person do? Who will lead you with knowledge and understanding. You see, a true shepherd teaches his sheep to feed on him. They teach the sheep to feed on his word and his ways. You lead them in greater knowledge and understanding. So that's what a staff does. But also, what about a shepherd's rod? What does it do? It protects. And how do you do that? You do that both by prayer and by correction. So many people will say, but it's my job to care for them and it's not to correct them. But that is not what a shepherd does. If you don't protect, your sheep and God's flock will actually be led astray. And so that's two pictures, right? A staff that leads others to him in his ways and his words, and two, a rod that directs. As God is challenging us at Church of the Front Range to be a more, of a shepherding community, I just encourage you to pray today on who is God calling you to shepherd. Maybe it's already someone you already have influence over, like your kids or employees or wherever, or maybe it's someone that God is going to lay on your heart. But either way, just begin intentionally shepherding someone or someones and watch all that God will do in and through that relationship. And I just also encourage you, if you're not in a shepherding community, I encourage you, come on April 14th in a couple of weeks, check out our small groups, because this is our goal of what a small group community will be like here at our church. And so, so thankful for you guys and praying today that God accelerates your ability to hear even more from him today. Love you guys.